Okay, so now let's move on with the globalization of culture. From this one, we're going to discuss about on how the culture or the popular culture affect our own globalization. Kasi nga, when you say globalization, it pertains about the different countries, diba? It pertains on their own culture as well, and the interconnectedness in or within or between the countries, whether uh, it is political, economic, or sociocultural. So from this slide, you could see about some contribution of culture as part of globalization. And meron tayong disadvantages. Hindi naman sa disadvantages. I mean, disadvantages on the right side, and then yung on the left side is we have ito yung parang mga contributions of globalization of culture on how the way we look culture as on a global scale, di ba? So una dito, we have here is interconnectedness. So we all know that when you say globalization of culture, we are connected, di ba? Why are we connected? Kasi nga, some culture that we're practicing nowadays is the same culture with the same countries as well. 'Di ba? Kung anong culture nila sa Amerika, they are somewhat liberated and we're somewhat conservative. Asian, 'di ba? It's not only in the Philippines but many of some Asian countries are conservative. However, when we look on the culture of the Western countries, like for example, is United States together with Europeans, they're somewhat liberated. However, because of globalization and yan nga, culture natin, which is being adopted by different countries now, the conservatism or our culture as being a conservative people, we are now adapting the liberated, di ba? Noon talagang very conservative tayo. That until such time that you have graduated from college, di ba? You have your own job. It's only the time for you to look for a boyfriend or a girlfriend. However, ngayon, while you're in college, di ba? While you're in high school pa lang, may mga boyfriend, girlfriend ka na. And some parents, hindi naman sa lahat, but some of the parents are allowing that one. Kasi nga, maybe they think that it's normal for a teenager to have a boyfriend or girlfriend. Diba? And yun ang one example of how are we connected to each other. However, however, as part of disadvantages of our globalization, as part of interconnectedness, sabi nga natin, is ano ba talaga to? Does it pertain about interconnectedness in terms that we have the same culture? Diba? We have the same when you say homogeneity kasi, it is somewhat, we are practicing the same culture, di ba? It is not about interconnectedness according to globalization of culture, but rather than it is homogeneity. When you say homogeneity, the meaning of that is we have the same quality of products. Meaning, kung may t-shirt ka na naka-brand as Supreme na in America, meron din dito sa Pilipinas. So, of course, if you try to look on a global scale, tama nga naman, di ba? We have a different brands pero magkakaparehas pa rin sila. Kung yung sapatos mo na Nike, like for example is Adidas, hindi, Nike pala yun, di ba? Air Jordan 1, di ba? And it's actually the same and it is actually being used, not actually everyone, but many of people are using that one. Or in other words, you have the same quality of products and the same brand as well. So magkakaparehas niyan. So is it about interconnectedness or homogeneity? So those are the two perspective on how the way we look globalization as part of the culture. Ito namang isa, the second one here is we have the cultural exchange, di ba? And as part of globalization pa rin, uso ngayon sabi ko nga, di ba? We are adapting some of the cultures of others about liberation, di ba? Yes, liberation, and then we have here a conservative culture, di ba? And it's not only about the exchange of the culture, but as well as on how are we adapting the culture that is being portrayed, not in a locality, but on a global scale. Kasi nga, culture is very open now to everyone. So, kasi nga, di ba, through the use of social medias, through the use of Facebook, Instagram, uh, you know what is the culture of the Americans. You know actually what is the culture of Africans, di ba? Even Europeans, or if, specifically, we have their own countries, di ba? Like for example, in Kenya, ano ba ang culture nila doon? In the Philippines as well. Even in Malaysia, in different parts of the globe. So, coming from that one, different cultures now are being showcased not only on their own locality or in their own country, I mean, but as well as on the global scale. Now, if people now try to watch or try to adapt those culture, nagkakaroon tayo ng cultural erosion or it also known as deculturization. Okay, ano ba to? Okay, what do we mean by deculturization? Uh, when I, it when we say deculturization, it pertains on uh, our original culture is now being hindi naman sa na-erase, okay? It is now being para siyang we're not anymore using our culture as part of cultural exchange. Kasi nga some of your culture is now being adapted coming from foreign countries, di ba? Or bahala ka kung anong culture man ang ina-adapt mo. As well as you're not actually adapting your own original culture. Like for example, if you're in Cordillera, di ba? As much as possible, you must be practicing the culture of Cordillerans. However, because of cultural exchange, di ba? You could learn a lot of cultures now, and it's still up to you whether to practice the culture that you're watching or the culture that you're adapting, whether it is a foreign or it is local. But as part of sociology, as part of history, as much as possible sana, we try to practice our own culture so that our culture will not become obsolete. When you say obsolete, it is not anymore being used, or in other words, the meaning of that is nakalimutan na natin. We forgot our own culture. And remember, as much as possible, we should not forget our own culture. Kasi nga, through the use of our own culture, uh, we can be called as a unique person, di ba? Kasi nga, you have a very unique culture, which is not something being practiced any around the world. Kasi nga, if you're trying to adapt a culture that is somewhat dominant in the society, then you became part of that culture. Then you became part of the majority of the society. And yun na, how are you being, how can you be called as an Ilocano if you're not practicing the culture of Ilocano, di ba? The same with Cordilleran. How can you be called a Cordilleran if you're not practicing uh, the culture of Cordilleran. So, parang ganun lang siya kasimple, 'di ba? And ganun lang nangyayari sa atin, okay? We cannot deny the fact that it's really happening nowadays, 'di ba? Especially ngayon na very abundant na for everybody with the use of the internet, with the use of Facebook and so on and so forth, wherein they could watch what culture they're practicing in the Western, di ba? All of those things. Next here is we have the community expansion. And yes, as part of globalization of culture is that community expansion. When you say community expansion, still it pertains on the culture. On a certain culture kasi in America, di ba? It is only being practiced in America before. But however, because of people are now trying to adopt that culture, the Americanization tawag nila doon, or specifically yung mga businesses nila, like for example, McDonaldization, di ba? The Nike World, all of those things. So that is an example of community expansion. From the word itself, expansion, a certain culture is expanding, coming from the community itself. So the boundaries now of culture that is being adopted by the people is becoming bigger and bigger, and until such time that it will become a global phenomenon or phenomenon, diba? Wherein people from different countries in the globe are now trying to adapt the culture coming from that specific community. Especially nga, kadamihan nga talaga, kadamihan example ko, came from America. Kasi kadamihan or most of our own adapted culture or dominant cultures that we try to observe nowadays came from America. Diba? All of those things. However, meron dito tinatawag na resistance to change. Okay, so ano bang resistance to change na yan? Okay, sabi ko nga kanina, there is a deculturization. When you say deculturization, the meaning of that is, sabi nga natin, is for us to forget our own original culture. However, pag may dumating na foreign culture that is somewhat, hindi naman sa better, di ba? But some people are calling this one that some foreign culture is better based on our own local culture. But however, we still wanted to retain our own culture. And that is good. Kaya ganyan ang nangyayari sa atin. So, some of the people pa rin, maybe in some part of Luzon man yan, are still resisting in terms of changing their own culture. Even though the culture that is being practiced nowadays is somewhat dominant to all other cultures. Meaning of that is yung parang culture ng America is now influencing the cultures of Filipinos, which is now the reality. However, still some people would like to retain the originality of their own culture. And mapapansin mo yan, mapapansin mo yan with different indigenous people's culture na yan. Kasi nga they would like to be unique and they would like to to retain their own culture. Next naman dito, we have the expansion of consciousness and cultural clash and then tensions natin. So, yan pa rin. When say expansion of consciousness, noon, hindi natin alam na ang mga Western countries pala are somewhat, they're liberated. And tayo conservative as Asians, di ba? However, however, nagkakaroon na tayo ng cultural clash. Okay? Yun na. Like for example, you grew up in America and you came here back in the Philippines. So, in some point, you practice about liberation or liberty or freedom in America. And when you came here in the Philippines, you're somewhat, parang na culture shock ka na. That, bakit ganon? That they are very conservative. However, when I grew up in America, ganito ang ginagawa namin, whatsoever. So, nagkakaroon na tayo ng cultural clash. However, then, because of the cultural clash, some of the group of people are trying to adapt the dominant culture. However, hindi naman sa lahat ng cultures are now adapting the dominant culture. Diba? And next, we have foster tolerance and understanding. It pertains about stereotypes. I will not anymore discuss each of about globalization of culture as well. And then, yung mga yan, we have the identity crisis, all of those things. The generation gap. When you say generation gap is there is a big gap between two generations. Even though those two generations are within a certain spectrum, like for example, you are from generation X and then Y. And when you say X, they are born with 60s and then 70s. However, for Y, they're born in 80s and then 90s. Pero even though magkasunod yung generation na yun, it doesn't mean that there is a similarity between those generations. May tinatawag yung generation gap, wherein we can observe that coming from that generation gap, I'm not only pertaining about my own experience, but the same with the experience of others. You try to question about your parents, yung mga pinanganak ng 60s and then 70s natin. If you try to observe, there is somewhat medyo mahirap silang makaaral ng mga technologies natin. Like for example, the use of the laptop, the use of the cell phone. As much as possible, they do not want to use cell phone that is, or they do not want to use a smartphone that is touchscreen, di ba? Mas gusto pa nilang di keypad kasi nga mas madali daw i-operate rather than using the smartphone having the touch screen, di ba? And then even though you try to teach them about technology, paulit na hindi pa rin nila nagigets. So that is an example of a generation gap, di ba? And then ano pa ba? Heteroglossia. Okay, what do we mean by heteroglossia? Is ito na yung kabaliktaran ng homogeneity. Remember, when you say homogeneity, it is having the same quality of products being given with a different type of people man yan or different citizens man yan, all of those things. However, when you say heteroglossia, there is now a difference between the quality of the products. Ibig sabihin, nagkakaroon na tayo ng mga alam yun, because of competition, because of globalization, nagkakaroon ng madaming mga products. Nagkakaroon ng mga different brands, di ba? Isang product lang yan, pero ang daming brands. Like for example, sa lotion, di ba? Ang daming mga brand. We have Nivea, and then, di ko alam yung iba, basta madaming brands. And then, one good example of heteroglossia is, I do not know pag nabutan nyo to, but during our time, when we were in childhood, ang sa amin ay iisa lang ang uso. Like for example, when we were in elementary, okay? When we were in elementary, ang ginagawa namin before, kung may uso na laro, like for example, ang uso during that time is Jolens, di ba? Jolens. And everyone is playing Jolens. Walang naglalaro ng iba. Kunwari, ang next na uso na naman, naging, ano pa bang mga uso? Let us say, yung mga larong luksong baka. And then everyone is playing luksong baka. Okay? However, when as time passes by, you could observe now that there is a heteroglossia. Okay, when you say heteroglossia, there is now a different quality or different play games that is being played by the children. Ngayon, di ba, hindi na pag may Jolens, meron ng text, meron na ring mga lastiko, all of those things. So, wala na yung uso-uso ba? Kumbaga, ang uso is somewhat uh, what is famous is everybody will play all of the games. So yun na, magkakaiba na yung mga games na linalaro natin. And that's part now of globalization of the culture. Okay, so next na tayo. Let's move on naman on uh, the theory of Althusser, di ba? Or Althusserianism. According to him, ideology is divided into two parts. We have the imaginary dimension and then we have the express in material form. So, ibig sabihin, when you say ideology, according to him, is that it is a principle, it is a belief, or it is somewhat part of the tradition that does not only exist with our own mind, but rather than it exists with our own mind together with the action of a certain imaginary dimension. So, ibig sabihin yan, uh, Althusser believe in empiricism. What do we mean by empiricism? Empiricism, again, is the study of knowledge wherein knowledge is being created based on the action of the person, or you try to learn based from your own experience. And for ideology, according to Althusser, is that we try to create our own ideology. We try to create a certain specific knowledge wherein that knowledge is being practiced by the people. And that is now ideology. However, versus niyan, ang cultural ideology natin only pertains on the values, traditions, norms, ethics, principles, and so on and so forth. Or meaning, when you say cultural ideology, it is the abstract concept of ideology. Kasi nga, when you say abstract, yan nga, you do not know, you cannot observe what is abstract. And ano bang abstract na yun? Those are the things that we think. Those are the things that we believe in. Sabi ko nga noon, you cannot tell about the culture of the person by looking at the face of the person. Di ba? Even though the color of the skin of the person is black, white, brown man yan, whatever color of skin man yan, you cannot judge the person by looking at the physical appearance of the person. Diba? And hindi mo rin, you cannot really define the culture of the person by looking on the physical appearance. Rather than, we try now to look on the action of the person on what is he doing. Diba? And from that action, that person that is actually doing, we now try to conceptualize on what ideology that person is practicing. Kaya nga, yan ang ibig sabihin ni Althusser. That when you say ideology, it does not only pertain about the norms, about the values. Kasi those things are actually abstract. And you cannot observe those things. However, ideology is somewhat that you believe it is a norm, it is a value or values, tradition, but a person is practicing about his own ideology. Kasi nga, according to Althusser, culture is about experience. We try to learn the experience of the people before. And sabi niya nga rin, we cannot deny the fact that ideology is subject to change, di ba? Kasi nga, the only permanent thing in this world is change. So, culture and ideology are like the same. However, when you say ideology, it concerns as well about the action of the person. It does not only pertain about the norms and then values of the person. So, yan ang theory naman of Althusser. Okay? So, next naman, let's look on about Levicism. And of course, Levicism is somewhat famous in his own theory about popular culture of industrialization and urbanization. Pero ano nga ba ito? Okay? Because of industrialization, we have a popular culture. And we all know that as part of popular culture is it is being controlled by the media, 'di ba? Okay, so ano ba ang industrialization? Remember, when you say industrialization, it is the start of using the machine. Okay, it is the start of using technological advancement. Okay, and then ganun din, it is the use of media. And we all know that when you say industrialization, it pertains about the mass production. Diba? When you say mass production, we are producing products that will cater as much as possible the needs of almost all of the people. Like for example, ano bang mga kailangan ng tao? Mga bahay, mga damit, di ba? Mga sasakyan. I do not know if that's a need, pero madami na rin nagpapatronize ng mga automobiles natin. However, if you try to observe now in industrialization, and many businesses now are trying to come up with the culture that they would like to become famous and popular. Kasi nga, if a certain product or a culture that has been created by company, of course, if that becomes popular or somewhat famous, the people will buy more, diba? Since the people will buy more, everybody is buying, that is now good for the company because it will give them more profit. And we all know that almost, hindi naman sa lahat, almost all of different companies or big companies were owned by the middle class society. Not only the middle class society, even the rich people. However, may mga businesses kasi tayo that it is being controlled by the middle class. And yung mga products that is being produced by the middle class, it is now being patronized by the people below or yung mga mas mababa sa middle class natin. Hindi naman sila poor people, pero sila yung mga may kaya pa rin naman. Kasi when you say middle class, according to some of the researchers, when you say middle class, ikaw yung tao nagsisweldo around 50,000 to 150,000 per month na yun ha. For yung mga lower middle class natin, meron kasing, okay, madaming ano yan, madaming classification. But anyway, I will not anymore discuss on that one. Yun ang ibig sabihin ng industrialization natin. Industrialization pertains on standardization of cultural goods. And when I say standardization of cultural goods, it is the mass production of products. And people are now buying those products. And those different businesses are being owned by the middle class now. Okay, so after that one, after industrialization, is we have now the urbanization. Okay, unang-una, ano ba ang class disparity? Class disparity is the inequality of wealth. Okay, it is the gap of the rich and the poor. So meaning of that is, yung industrialization daw, ang result niyan is urbanization. And as part of urbanization is we have the class disparity. Because of the businesses, because of capitalism, according to Levicism, because of capitalism, it creates the gap between the poor and then the rich people. Sabi nga natin, the rich becomes richer and then the poor become poorer. All of those things. So that is part of industrialization. Maybe some of you would be asking, bakit kaya? Kasi nga sinasabi natin, it pertains about the companies. It pertains about the different businesses. Di ba? Remember, you're the employee. If you're the employee, you are the worker. Di ba? According to Marx. And then if you are the owner of the company, you are now the capitalist. Remember, your work is being paid with a fixed salary. So, fixed ang salary mo. Hindi siya, minsan siguro may bonuses, pero fixed ang salary natin. Whether we try to work hard or not, yun pa rin ang salary natin. However, for a capitalist, it depends upon the performance of the company. If the sales is high and good for the rich people, kasi nga, people are buying and then more profit is going in the account of the rich people. Pero hindi kasi yan absolute naman. Kasi minsan, parang ano lang yan, it's like a gambling that sometimes we are lucky and sometimes we're unlucky. Or in other words, kung tsumamba tayo, magkakaroon tayo ng bigger profit. However, pag hindi naman tsumamba, medyo malulugi naman tayo. So that is now about the risk of people who are investing their own money in capitalism or sila yung tinatawag natin na middle class. And then next naman dito, as part of urbanization is we have the urban culture. Maybe some of you are uh, aware of urban culture or alam niyo ang urban culture pero hindi niyo talaga alam ang meaning ng urban culture. Urban culture is that wherein uh, there are people who are located on a limited area or limited space. However, even though they're located at the same area, even though the area is not very big, so maliit lang siya, they're actually complete strangers to each other. One very good example of urban culture is not only on not only in uh, not only in what I mean in a certain apartment, pati to sa mga different cities na rin. The same with Baguio City and alam mo yung mga urbans natin, mga cities natin, ganito ang nangyayari sa urban culture natin. Like for example, we have here a boarding house, malaki yung building natin. And remember, we are located on a very limited space. So, isang building lang yan, magkakatabi yung rooms natin. So, all in all, parang sa isang building, let us say, may nakatira sigurong, kung malaki yung building niya, let us say, may nakatira sigurong 50 to 100 families, di ba? And coming from that one, supposed to be, since we are located on a very limited space, pag nasa province ka, it is automatic or it is the nature of the people to know about their own neighbors. Even though their neighbors are located very far away, they still know about the people on there. However, in a urban culture, that is now a different scenario. Kahit nga katabi mo yung pintuan, di ba? Magkaharap na yung pintuan nyo, hindi pa rin kayo magkakilala. And that's part of urbanization. Maybe some of you would be asking, bakit kaya ganun? Remember, as part of sociology, we only came here in the city for the purpose of working. Diba? Kasi pag nagbo-boarding house ka, bakit ka nagbo-boarding house? The meaning of that is wala kayong bahay. Diba? And why are you paying for the rent of your own boarding house? Kasi nga may trabaho ako dito. May eskwela ako dito. I am a student and I'm from the province of, like for example, Ilocos. Diba? And coming from that one, our main purpose here for staying in the urban area is for us, yan nga, to achieve the goal that we have. We are working, kaya nga, yun lang ang main purpose natin. So, we are not actually mandated for us to know about the people around us. Kasi nga, ang main purpose mo lang is to go to the school, is to study in the city. And your purpose is not actually to introduce yourself to your own neighborhood, di ba? To all of the boarding houses, all of those things. So, yan ang levicism natin. It all started with industrialization, and industrialization is about the production or the mass production. Okay, the creation of different businesses. And of course, it is owned by the middle class society kasi nga they have the capital for them to invest their own money. Pero may capital naman yung mga ano natin, lower classes natin. However, they are not inputting the risk kasi ayaw din nilang malugi. Kasi alam naman natin that when you say businesses, you need to invest then about risk. Pwede kang malugi or pwede kang chumamba. And after industrialization, the result now of industrialization is urbanization. And as part of urbanization, we have the class disparity. It is now the difference or the gap between the rich and the poor. The poor becomes richer, the richer becomes rich, the rich becomes richer, and then the poor becomes poorer. Okay, urban culture, as one example of that one is we do not know each other even though we're located on a single area. Magkakakwarto nga, hindi magkakakilala, di ba? Pag bed space ka lang, may common kitchen, and then may common CR, common kitchen, common CR, tapos hindi pa kayo magkakakilala, di ba? Okay, so next here is we have the cultural liberalism and liberal pluralism. Kala nyo, on the first glance, parang parehas lang sila. Okay, so let us first, let us try to look on the similarity between the two concepts. Unang-una, hindi yan magkakapareho. So, the two concepts have a liberalism and liberal. And we all know, liberal came from the word freedom. When you say freedom, it pertains on voluntariness of the person on doing something, or you are free on doing something. No one is compelling you or no one is limiting you to do something. And when you say freedom, we have a lot of freedom. The freedom of speech given to everyone, given to the reporters. So we could paano ito? We could give something. We could give our own opinion. You are free to speak, di ba? However, may limitation din yan. Of course, you're free to speak, but don't try naman to use your freedom of speech on destroying on the image of someone. Kasi nga, some of the people are using their own freedom to speech in order to destroy the image of someone. Or in other words, they call that one as the paninirang tao. Di ba? At meron naman tayong batas that will actually limit the freedom of speech. Kasi nga, we have the libel, we have the slander, and then we have the oral defamation. Diba? Yun yung pwedeng ikaso sa'yo in terms man that you're practicing too much of the freedom of your speech. The same with the freedom of expression. Diba? Freedom of conscience. Diba? Religious practice, when it's a religious practice, if you're a Roman Catholic, you are free on practicing about the practices of your own religion. You also have the freedom on choosing what religion na gusto mo. Hindi naman sabi ng gobyerno, dapat Roman Catholic lang ang ating religion. So, hindi naman. So, you still have the freedom whether on what religion that you're going to choose then. Our freedom to create association as well, the freedom of the press, and so on and so forth. Diba? However, as part of this freedom, there must be a limitation. Kasi nga, freedom is somewhat dangerous. Maybe some of you believe that when you say freedom, it is very peaceful. Freedom is about harmony and freedom is about peace and order. Yes, of course. Maganda ang freedom natin. But freedom must have limitation then. Okay, take for example na lang, what if we have an unlimited freedom? What will happen to our own society? So everybody could do whatever they want. Diba? Sabi mo kanina, there is a freedom of expression. Paano na lang pag yung tao ay mamamatay tao? Nabwisit sa yung tao, pinatay ka. Nabwisit ang isang tao, may pinatay siya. And remember, that is part of the freedom. You could do whatever what you want. So, what will result now on unlimited freedom is that there will become an anarchy. When we say anarchy, people are in chaos. Kasi nga, they could do whatever they want. So, wala silang sinusunod na batas. Or, in other words, ang sabi nila doon ay, sila ay parang, okay, the purge ang tawag nila, di ba? They're purging. When they say purge, yun, linalabas nila lahat ng gusto nilang gawin. I do not know if you watched the movie about the purge. So, sana ang liberalism daw or ang freedom must come with a limitation. Okay? There must be tolerance about the freedom. There must be understanding. There must be a mutual respect on the freedom of each other. Kasi nga, as much as possible, we need to balance about the freedom of each other. Because remember, you have the freedom of speech and everyone has the freedom of speech. So therefore, sana hindi sana mangyari that the freedom of one person will try to overtake the freedom of another person. Yun yung sinasabi ko sa inyo, yung paninirang tao, and so on and so forth. Okay? So, let us now look on the difference of cultural liberalism and liberal pluralism. Basta, ang sinasabi natin, they're the same that it talks about freedom. But when you say cultural liberalism, it pertains about the wider freedom. Or it is also known as the true freedom. So bakit kaya tinatawag ito as the true freedom? Remember, it came from the word culture. And culture pertains about the race and then the ancestry, the ethnicity, the tribe, the nationality, the religion, the caste, or the subcultures. In other words, when you say cultural liberalism, it pertains on what is automatic, hindi naman sa automatic, what is given in our own society na. So ano na ang meron sa society natin the day we were born. So it is not that it is created based on the opinion of someone, but it is created based on the history of the society. Okay? So yan, madami yan, di ba? We have the race na. However, when we try to look naman on liberal pluralism naman, it is more with the specific freedom. Okay? What is the purpose of the person creating a certain culture? So, liberal pluralism, from the word itself, plural. So, it pertains now about everyone. So, remember, in pluralism, everybody could create their own culture. Everybody could give his own opinion about what is a culture. Okay? So, if you try to compare about the two concepts, ang concept about cultural liberalism, it is more broad. It is broader than the liberal pluralism. Kasi nga, liberal pluralism is medyo specific yan. Like for example, if you are a person and then naniniwala ka sa isa sa ganitong bagay, and that's part of liberal pluralism. Or it takes about the population of the people, parang very minimal lang yung tao na naniniwala sa certain culture na yan. Okay? However, when you say cultural liberalism, it is more on very general yan. Like for example, the Cordilleran culture. Diba? Yan ang cultural liberalism. Pag liberal pluralism naman, let us say, you are a Cordilleran, pero medyo iba ang culture mo as part of the Cordilleran culture, or you have another type of culture. Like for example, sexual orientation. Diba? When you say sexual orientation, it pertains about gender. Okay? Sabi mo sa sarili mo, I feel that I am a boy even though you're a girl. So, lesbian ka, di ba? The same with boy. I feel that I am a girl even though I am a boy. So, you're a gay. So, those are liberal pluralism. It is somewhat specific. Even the attire, di ba? Formal attire, all of those things. Political opinions, the lifestyle on the way of your life, physical appearance, and so on and so forth. So those are the two things about cultural liberalism and liberal pluralism. Meron pa. O yan. When you say cultural liberalism here, uh, it it is a liberal view of society, 'di ba? However, when we say liberal pluralism, it is advocating limited political controls. Sinasabi ko nga kanina na paulit-ulit kong sinabi that when you say cultural, it is more in a broader concept of culture. However, when you say liberal, it is more on specified, or it is only limited based on the belief of the person. Advocating, cultural na naman, advocating individual freedom against imposed socio-cultural norms and uniformity, backed by democratic laws, international human rights. So we have the laws about the freedom of speech, di ba? We have the constitution, respect for individual and cultural differences, or it is also known as tawag nito, cultural relativism, tawag nila doon, di ba? For liberal naman, it is backed by capitalism and democracy. Sabi ko nga, di ba, if you're a capitalist, you try to create a culture that you think that will become famous and popular para magkaroon ka ng more profit. As part of democracy naman, sabi nga natin, everybody could do whatever they want. So, everybody could create their own culture that is somewhat limited on them lang. It is not backed by a certain law kasi nga liberal pluralism nga siya. Okay? Ano yung pinapractice ng bawat isa sa atin? Belief in self-imposed discipline, inner goodness, about your self-attitude naman yan. Respect of diversity of all kinds. Like for example, if you're a gay, you need to respect the lesbians, di ba? If you're a straight man, you need to respect about the LGBT community, all of those things. Positive attitude towards media as representative of diversity. Okay? So yan ang differences natin about cultural liberalism and liberal pluralism.